This is professional wrestler Kris Rex, and you're listening to the Playmakers Blog Podcast, my only destination for sports talk radio. I am Chris Carpenter, better known as Kris Rex, and for the last 9 years I have been traveling up and down the roads as an independent professional wrestler. I have had the opportunity to train, work with, and share locker rooms with some of the best to ever step foot inside the squared circle. My co-host is Alex Alcazaz, aka the Bear of Texas. A journalist born outside of Lyon, France, he moved to the United States at the age of 4, and his love of sports is what led him to become a sports writer. And with 7 years under his belt already, the sky is the limit for this young Texan. Together, we mix my knowledge and professional experience with his research and sports journalism to bring you a unique view on Vice TV's hit series, Dark Side of the Ring. This is Dark Side of the Podcast.
Over the years, numerous wrestling promoters have attempted to do the impossible, and the impossible is to start their promotion in an attempt to overthrow Vince McMahon and World Wrestling Entertainment out of the wrestling world. However, every promoter that's ever squared off against Vince McMahon has failed miserably. The list goes from Paul Heyman, Ted Turner, and Eric Bischoff, and hell, Dino Bravo. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Alex Alcazaz, aka the Bear of Texas, and I am here with professional wrestler and current Infinite Pro Wrestling Furry TV champion Kris Rex, and today we cover Cocaine and Cowboy Boots, the Herb Abrams story. Kris, it's an honor to have you back on the show, buddy.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here, man. Like I said, every week it just gets better and better. The stories get juicier and juicier and more fun to cover. So yeah, man. And it's sad to know that we'll actually be winding this down in a couple episodes, but we will have some bonus episodes up for y'all, so be on the lookout for those.
And just like I said, Kris, the surprises are there because I had no idea who Herb Abrams was, and I learned. The biggest thing is another guy who tried to take down Vince McMahon, but it didn't work. But in this guy's case, it was different because he did have an advantage. However, he let it slip away.
Yeah, well, I've heard of I didn't know too much about Herb Abrams, but I've heard of the UWF, and they really had some stacked talent and everything, so they really could have competed. I mean, if like you think of back then, they probably could have been competition, but like you said, he let it slip because of his own vices. So I guess we'll start the story here.
Indeed. So, in the time, wrestling in the 80s and 90s was starting to change. And Herb Abrams had money and everything to start his own promotion. And there was a wrestling convention. And I think at the time, they said that wrestling conventions didn't really happen. It was like it was like meet and greets and everything. But Herb Abrams took an opportunity to recruit wrestlers. And that opportunity that day, it actually worked out quite well.
All right, so let's just give him the full story here. John Arezzi, he was doing a Weekend of Champions, which, like you said, was really one of the first weekend-long conventions in professional wrestling. Now you have them all the time. There's like fucking 4 of them a year, 5 of them a year. There's one in like every state. So, John Arezzi was like the first promoter to actually do it, and he would have talent from Ric Flair, Mick Foley, Bruno Sammartino. He'd had a who's who of talent at these conventions, and this is where Herb Abrams would actually meet a lot of the talent. And at the time, he was just a fan, and he was always at these conventions, and he decided, hey, he wanted to start contacting talent for a potential promotion, and he knew that he needed a top-notch talent to make his promotion legitimate. So when he was going around to talent asking around, one person he had went to was Bruno Sammartino, and really, if you could get Bruno, that really like put some legitimacy in your promotion. So when he had told, I believe it was Mick Foley, he had told Mick Foley that he had Bruno Sammartino coming in. He gave a call to John, and John had verified that. John had called Bruno and verified that he was indeed working with Herb. So right off the bat, he had Bruno Sammartino, and that's definitely going to make talent come, because then it's, okay, this guy's serious. He's not just some guy saying he's going to start a promotion and it never happens. He's actually got a top guy, a prominent name in professional wrestling as like his starter. Herb Abrams was no more than a fan that really had an idea to start this promotion, and he had started contacting the talent. One of the talents he had contacted was actually part of a popular tag team in the WWF during the 80s called the Killer Bees, B. Brian Blair. And he said he accepted to go work for Herb Abrams in the UWF as a way to get back to the WWE, like the same rotation as WWE, but without the pressure of having to work 67 straight days in a row. And I thought that was kind of interesting to me, because it's kind of what wrestlers do now. You know, when they get released from WWE, they kind of go to Impact Wrestling, or they'll go work in a big indie that really doesn't work, 300 days a year, but it's big enough to where it's still on the WWE's eye. So I find it funny how even back then it was kind of the same way.
Back then it had to be much harder, and it was not only like the less pressure of work, but it was also the creativity that was offered that really amazed me too, because Herb Abrams was willing to let the talents do things their way. I mean, the way Mick Foley described it, Mick Foley says, I went from wrestling handcuffed to where I can just do whatever.
Well, Herb Abrams had held a UWF press conference at one of the Weekend of Champions conventions to pretty much introduce the UWF and what he wanted to do with the UWF. But during the press conference, Dan Spivey and Brian Blair Brawl had a big fight. I'm not sure. Was that work, or was that a shoot?
I believe it was a work.
Okay, it was just to get some publicity. Okay.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, exactly. It was part of an advertising. To kind of catch people's attention. Look at us. Okay,
because I can't remember if they said whether it was or not. Okay, so they had worked a brawl between Brian Blair and Dan Spivey. He said that Blackjack Mulligan would be his booker, but there was one problem with that, Alex.
He was incarcerated, according to McFoley.
He was in jail. Yes. And he also promised that Bruiser Brody would be a top star, but he had been murdered in Puerto Rico a year earlier.
Mm-hmm. So that brings a little bit of suspicion. So what's going through Herb Abrams' mind? Was it the cocaine or whatever, or maybe was he just pulling our leg?
Well, I kind of noticed this a lot with I've dealt with a few promoters that were like this, where it's like they promise the moon, and it never happens. But the reason they promise all this stuff is because they really want people to invest in it. They want talent. So we kind of bullshitted, which I'm not a fan of. I do not agree with. I don't think you should ever bullshit talent or bullshit the fans like that. Especially when people like Bruiser Brody was dead for a year and you're saying he's going to be a top star. I mean, that's just out there. But Herb Abrams, like I said, he was just a super fan. He owned a clothing store called for heavy-set women called I'm a Big Girl Now. So he really didn't know the business. He was a super fan. He was what we call a mark that just wanted to run a promotion. And again, today that still happens. Well, you'll have a guy that's a super fan, a mark, that he just wants. He has a load of money and he just wants to run a company. But as we'll see later in this episode, and with promoters today, is they kind of want to be stars of the show. But they wound up getting a television deal. What was the name of that sports network?
Sports Channel America. Now, I have to stress this, Kris. despite that, Abrams had no experience in the wrestling business. He was given a budget of $1 million by Sports Channel America, and it was to develop weekly television series. So I mean,
Yeah,
it's just amazing, and and now the promotion it started in the fall of 1990, and I believe it was in the Southern California area.
October 1st, 1990
Mm-hmm.
was the debut of the TV show.
And here, let me go over a little bit of a list of the talent that he brought in. Goes from Cowboy Bob Orton, Brian Blair. I apologize for my voice, folks. Cactus Jack, Colonel De Beers, Dan Spivey. I hope I pronounced that correctly. David Sammartino, Don Morocco, Ivan Koloff, Paul Orndorff, a.k.a. Mr. Wonderful, and Dr. Death Steve Williams.
Yeah.
And you mentioned Bruno Sammartino came, but not only was it Bruno Sammartino, but the legendary Captain Lou Albano was brought in. But I should stress this as well: they were not. I don't think they were brought in as wrestling talent. I believe they were brought in as to do the commentary.
Yes, they were. They were brought. Bruno Sammartino and Captain Lou Albano were his hosts slash commentators, and this is what really made Herb have this attack mode on Vince McMahon. He had actually met with Vince and told him to promote the East Coast and Midwest, and Herb actually wanted to handle the West Coast for him. Vince blew him off, though, and from that day forward, it was his mission to compete with Vince McMahon. And I have to say, at the time, some of the talent he had some top names that, like Dr. Death Steve Williams was in his prime at the time, Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff, but there was one hit to Vince McMahon that came as a shock to me, and I'm sure came as a shock to you while watching the episode. Andre the Giant.
Yes, and it was mentioned that he had signed a long-term deal. And then we see a clip of the promo, and he asked, correct me if I'm wrong, Kris, but he asked, what is this promotion? And what's so amazing...
He asked what the name of the promotion was.
Yeah, I mean, and that confused me. So he just came to a place not knowing where he was going? I mean, why would that happen?
And he was only there for a short while because Vince offered Andre a better deal. And what I find funny is that when they announced Andre the Giant, now I know wrestling companies do this all the time on the air as a work, to get people hyped in, but they had said that Andre the Giant had signed a multi-year contract, and then he swooped away from Vince McMahon. So it kind of like, if I was a fan at the time, I would have been like, wait, isn't that bullshit? If he had a multi-year contract, he would not be able to sign with Vince McMahon.
Unless there was a clause that we don't know about. Or unless Vince McMahon paid off the penalties and whatnot.
I will tell you, I don't think that there was a contract at all, a multi-year contract for Andre the Giant. Not at all, bro.
So it was all a ruse is what you're saying.
I think it was, like I said, it's not a ruse because it's the suspension of belief with fans. And that's why I say it really wasn't a lie. It wasn't a ruse. It's what you say. If a company went out there and independent company said, Chris Rex just signed his contract. Did I really sign a contract? No. I didn't sign it, but it's to push, hey, I'm their star, I'm one of their stars.
So in other words, it's to catch people's attention.
Yeah, pretty much. It kind of builds it as he's our star, he's a contracted talent. I see it a lot. I mean, even in Infinite sometimes, where we'll be like, we have a contract. I have a verbal contract with them, with Infinite. So I do have a contract with them. We do have a verbal agreement for certain dates and certain, price and whatever. And, however our agreement is. But, as far as signing anything, there's nothing really signed. But they can sit there and say, hey, Chris Rex is under contract with us, because there is a verbal agreement. But there are promotions out there that'll do that, TNA sometimes, they'll do it. Well, he just signed his contract, and really that contract, all that contract is an agreement to certain dates. It's a booking agreement. So it is a contract of sorts, but it's a booking agreement. So they just put over the multi-year thing to kind of hype up Andre the Giant. Unfortunately, that kind of fell flat on its face.
Wow. Wow. I mean,
And
unbelievable.
what's funny about that is you see that nowadays where someone will grab a talent from WWE, and because they're on a short-term contract they're on what we call a pay per appearance. Vince can swoop them right back up.
Hmm. I mean,
It,
Vince is powerful.
it's not. I mean, it's at the end of the day, it's I got to feed my family. Like I know a lot of the Dark Side of the Ring has painted Vince McMahon as the devil, and I know sometimes on here we somewhat paint that picture of him being evil, but at the end of the day, he's a businessman, and he's going to protect his business first. You just took one of his top drawers. Of course, he's going to offer the guy more money than you. You don't have more money than Vince McMahon.
I mean, it's like we said. Herb Abrams wanted to compete with Vince, and part of the competition is fighting over the talent, and Vince is not going to back down just like that. I mean, especially when it's one of the biggest draws, and a guy that he's known for so long, a guy that he trusts. Well, no shit, Vince is going to go through hell just to bring him back. That's
and
Vince
at the
McMahon for
time,
you.
and at the time, Andre was like a shell of himself. At least working for the UWF he was. And I'm sure he's seen it as, hey, I'm getting a fucking payday. I'm getting hotels paid for. I'm getting everything I want, Who wouldn't? You can't blame Andre for that, He gets a lighter schedule. He doesn't have to work as hard. And he's getting paid. Fuck it.
Indeed, Chris, you're doing a good job leading the dance. Keep at it, brother.
All right. So now we start to dive into Herb Abrams, the person, and what he's really about. And we start to get to the crazier side now. Marty Yesberg was a manager known as the Colonel in the UWF. He heard about a mark out in California. For those, I know I've thrown this term around a few times in our episodes. Let me explain what a mark is. A mark is a fan who believes it. Who believes it's real, and most of the time they want to be in the business. So it's what today we call a money mark. A guy who's a super fan that has a load of money and he just wants to dump this money into professional wrestling, having no experience and having no understanding of the consequences and the losses he could take. He just wants to shove his money into wrestling because it's been his dream. So the Colonel had heard about this money mark out in California. He was throwing money around with a company called UWF, and he went for just a meet with Herb Abrams. So that he was set up in a nice suite in Beverly Hills, and Herb sends two call girls to the hotel room to meet him in the suite. And the way he described these call girls were so funny to me because he says, these weren't your average South Carolina snaggletooth call girls.
I mean,
and I was dying about that.
I mean, look, he was doing what we do. He was just simply telling the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. I mean, in Hollywood, things are just different. I mean, you're in Los Angeles, California. I mean, you're in a different part of the country, brother. So obviously, he was a place that was new to him. Like the girls, it's not what he expected. So I mean, he was trying to tell us how blown away he was.
Didn't expect call girls to come to the hotel at all. So as these call girls are there, Marty says he's drooling over himself because he had never even seen women like this. And Herb breaks out some cocaine to complete the night. And the Colonel had said that he wanted to get out of there as fast as he could because he was worried that a SWAT team would come breaking down the door, but he didn't know what to do because he was on the West Coast, out his comfort zone, and the room was in his name.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And what he said was basically a porno broke out, and Marty just sat away from it, and he said it was just a long night. So I can imagine what went down in that. I wish he would have told the whole story of what went down in that whole night, because I'm interested in that. Like, I'll just come out in the open. I am interested in the rock star lifestyle. I am interested in the partying and all that. That's my thing. I do like to party here and there. I won't go into specifics, but I like to party. I like that rock star lifestyle. Going into hotel rooms, and whatever happens. That's why a lot of these 80s stories appeal to me, because I'm like, man, if I was If I was a worker in the 80s, if I was a wrestler in the 80s, man, I would have had the time of my fucking life, bro.
Man, I can't imagine how difficult the lifestyle would be.
Man, I would be all for it, though.
What's up? How's it going? You already know my voice. You know who I am. This is Donnie the Playmaker Silence from the Playmakers Podcast. And I just want to take some time and talk about Anchor FM, as we've been using Anchor FM for over 2 years now, and it's been very good to us. It's been very great for us. So for those of you who are trying to get into the podcast world and you need a hosting platform and you don't have the budget and you want to do something free just to try it out to see where you at, try Anchor FM. Anchor is the one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing your podcast. Best of all, it's 100% free and ridiculously easy to use. And now, Anchor can match you with great sponsors who want to advertise on your podcast. That means you can get paid right away. So when you hear this, you know, it sounds good enough. But I'm telling you right now, give it a shot. Anchor FM, by it being free, it gives you opportunity to step into the podcasting world and let you do your own thing. So if you want to give it a shot and you want to try to make some money or just do podcasting as a hobby, go to anchorfm.com/start to get started right away. And remember, once you get started, hit us up at the Playmakers Bar so we can listen to you at the show. Good luck.
All right. So anyway, we hear the story, and this is when the promotions starting to. That's when it's starting to begin. That's when they're starting to have these shows and whatnot.
Yeah, they're having their TV tapings, and what I find funny is at one of the tapings they're showing off the UWF television title, and Herb Abrams referred to the F as a fuck you to Vince McMahon, and like I said, his one goal was to take out Vince McMahon. So, like I said, he brought in Andre the Giant, and like we said, that didn't last long. I'm sure it was great for the fans, and I'm sure he was a great draw. I'm sure he helped make them money for the time he was there.
But overall, it was brief. So all the if the fact that it was brief, all the efforts were all for naught. And I'm glad you mentioned you remind the folks that the F was a fuck you to Vince McMahon, and you mentioned this in our Dino Bravo episode. This is about bitterness as well.
Yeah.
It's not just about competing, but it's about literally trying to get back at Vince because he pissed you off.
Yeah, and see where Herb's philosophy is kind of what killed him. Not only going after Vince McMahon and trying to make Vince your competition, and the way his matches were, like he had so many gimmicks and characters, and because he thought it entertained him, he thought it would entertain everybody. And his solution to this was making himself a part of the show. And that kind of, that I'm sure that rubbed the guys the wrong way. Whether they're getting paid, it's kind of like this guy that doesn't know what he's doing is now making himself the star of his own show.
What we have to stress is this guy had no experience in the wrestling business. He was a businessman, but wrestling was just not his kind of world.
See, and I know people sit there and say, oh, well, Vince McMahon did it. Well, Vince McMahon was born into this business. He worked in this business before he even took over the company from his father. His father had the company from his grandfather, so he was born into this. He knows his business. So yeah, he can make himself an on-screen character because he knew enough to,
Exactly.
As compared to Herb Abrams, who was nothing but a money mark who wanted to be a part of the show. And again, that you'll see that all I have personally wrestled for promotions where the promoter or the booker has no idea what the fuck they're doing. They shouldn't be in the business at all, except maybe being the money guy, and they want to be the commissioner, or they want to make themselves a champion, and they want the spotlight.
You see, folks, once again, my point. A man's ego can become his biggest enemy.
Yeah, man, and not only was his ego, but he was a big partier, man, and that, as we learned throughout the series, oftentimes is self-destruction. But he tried the merchandising. He had cookies, for with all the talent on there, but Guess what else he had, Alex? He had his own cookie called Herbie cookies.
Huh. So it seems like he was trying to steal the attention away from his wrestlers. Like, at first he tells the guys, it's going to be all about you guys, I'm going to take care of you guys. But then he shifts from... He shifts to a bit of a selfish man. Like, now he's going to try to limit his guys and hold them back. I mean...
Yeah, and that was the thing, is what all of them signing on is they had the free will, kind of creative freedom to do what they want, and now here he is kind of hogging that spotlight from them, interjecting himself in matches and interjecting himself in segments, and it becomes a chaotic environment. I mean, he did the cookies, he did the ice cream. He wanted to do ice cream bars, but only got the cookie deal. You know, he pretty much tried to model Vince's business, which isn't a bad thing, but you have to do it the right way. And following Vince's model, he went on to pay-per-view. He wanted to do pay-per-view with his Beach Brawl event.
Yes, and the guy mentions because these wrestling promotions, pay-per-views is the way to how should I put it, to improve financially. I mean, not only because it make money. I mean, you can grow the fan base can grow.
Yeah, it can improve you financially as far as growing a fan base, but it can also be a financial loss. Mm-hmm. And that's honestly what this pay-per-view was. He called it Beach Brawl. It did not take place at a beach.
No,
it took place
in the not even close to a major city.
Well, here's the thing. From the get-go, he promised that that there would be major news media and that there would be millions of fans watching. And he decided to get a building that, I think it was like 20,000 people or something like that. Mm-hmm. I know it was in a few thousands. He gets this building that I'm sure companies today couldn't even sell out, So not only was he promoting Beach Brawl that wasn't on a beach, he's promising all that a million fans are going to be watching, and he's going to sell out the building. And as the days lead up to the pay-per-view event, which normally any businessman would be focused on point, we're like a couple days from this fucking pay-per-view, let's make sure everything's run down. I've been there where we've even done small pay-per-views, that weren't even aired live, but still we're there at the venue the night before, making sure everything's set up, going down match cards, making sure everybody's going to be there, making sure flights are ready. It's go time. Like, the last couple days aren't slacking. Those are the hardest you have to work, especially when you're putting on a televised event, those are the hardest days you have to work, because you have to make sure. I know anything can go wrong at any time, but you have to kind of prepare and make sure, okay, if I have all my ducks in order, then everything else is out of my control. Herb Abrams decides to enjoy the Florida nightlife scene. And he was a big cokehead, and he had apparently been partying all week, and he was found by Lenny, who pretty much found him and was like, dude, you need to fucking straighten yourself out because we have a fucking pay-per-view to do. And he pretty much told Herb that after the show was over, after they had done the pay-per-view, that either Herb goes to rehab or Lenny's done. He's out, which is understandable.
Oh, yeah, totally.
I probably would have put him in the same position. Like, I'm here helping you. I'm your partner here, and this is what you're out doing 2-3 days before fucking a pay-per-view. And, of course, the show wasn't even close to being sold out. Like, it was only had maybe a couple hundred people in an arena that fit a few thousand, And in order to try to hide this on television, they had to turn the lights down to hide the empty seats, and that's done today in venues. I'm sure WWE does it. I've heard stories of WWE where they'll block off a certain area, or they won't show a certain area on TV if it's empty.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've seen that. I mean, live shows I've been to in WWE, also in AEW. When I went to AEW when they were in Garland, yeah, they do that. They do a good job of it. Would you mind? I got a couple of details actually about the event. Would you like me to actually talk about it?
Go right ahead.
Well, before I do that, I want to ask you, so as far when you mentioned that a pay-per-view is either a financial gain or financial loss, in other words, it's either a hit or miss.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Okay, So
there's no guarantee that because you're on pay-per-view, people are going to watch. There's no guarantee that because you're on pay-per-view, people are going to come attend live. And for a small company that's just starting out to go on the pay-per-view, that is a huge financial risk.
Exactly. I mean, ECW sort of went through that risk when they were going to start their first pay-per-view.
But they were actually, see, the difference is they had their fan base. Their fans were the one who got them on pay-per-view.
Oh, yeah, totally.
They lost their pay-per-view. They were, back in 96, they were going to go on pay-per-view. Around 95, 96, they were talking about going on pay-per-view. Because of the mass transit incident, they lost it. But the fans kept writing letters and emailing the cable providers and in demand, who at the time were the people in charge of the pay-per-views, and their fans is what got them on pay. So it pretty much showed them, oh shit, there's enough people out here that are going to buy it. So really, it worked out well because they wound up doing pay-per-views from 96 to 2001.
Well, while in ECW's case, fun while it lasted, right?
Yeah, well, you said you had some details on the event, right?
Yes, sir, and I'd like to get started. Well, folks, just so you know, I mean, this was the first and only live pay-per-view event, and like Kris said, it was Beach Brawl. It took place June 9th, 1991. It was in Palmetto, Florida, and it was mentioned that this was an hour away from the closest major city. So that's already a huge mistake to have a pay-per-view, a huge show, that far. I mean, that's just a bad strategy. I mean, I know nothing about booking or whatever, but I mean, it's obvious, it's common sense, but that it's bad.
This is why you have me on the show, right? I can kind of, guide you on what the right and the wrong is here. And what was wrong was totally going outside of the city. That's where you want to go. That's where the people are, especially if you're doing a pay-per-view. You don't want to go to some outskirt, man. No matter how big the pretty and beautiful the venue is, you want to stay in the city for a pay-per-view. And that's even today, like not even back in the 80s and 90s and early 90s. I mean, even today, does WWE ever do a pay-per-view that's not in a city?
Nope.
Did AEW ever do a pay-per-view that wasn't in a city?
Nope.
No, you could do TV out in your outskirts in your little towns, but never a fucking pay-per-view, man.
Although, when they did AEW in Dallas, it was actually in Garland, which is about 30 minutes from Dallas.
Yeah, but I mean that's 30 minutes. That's not like an hour and a half away from the closest fucking city,
I mean the crowd was big when I went to AEW. It was a full house. So anyway, so the capacity of the building is 4,000. But the interesting part is the attendance, Kris, according to this, was only 550 people.
Okay, so it was 4,000. So I was totally out the ballpark with 20,000. All right.
Well, the building was renovated, so maybe the information's changed. But anyway, so there were total 8 professional wrestling matches. I apologize, folks, for my voice once again. And the main event was Steve Williams versus Bam Bam Bigelow. For the inaugural Sports Channel Television Championship, and Steve Williams won. But it was considered a failure. I mean, because the low attendance was not only extremely poor, but you want to know the buy rate of the whole thing, Kris?
0.1? 0.01?
Yeah. No.
Wow! I was on the money. Wow.
0.10.
Oh wow!
I mean, that's still that. I mean, it doesn't really make a difference. That's still an abject failure.
0.
Excuse me.
Wow, man. Yeah, that definitely was a financial failure for him then, man.
I mean, that's... And in this case, folks, I mean, Kris is actually going to agree. Not only is this an embarrassment in a business standpoint, but the talent. They have to wrestle in front of a very small crowd. Think about how they feel.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, a wrestler's job is not to worry about that, though. I mean, it is, but at the same time, when it's day of the show and there's only a couple hundred people out there, there's no, I'm not working tonight. It's you work it, whether it's 10 people or whether it's 100,000 people. You still work the show. But I'm sure it was a little a little unsettling for the talent. I mean, even. I don't work crowds nearly, as much as, in the thousands or anything. But if I'm working a show and I see like 15 people out there, yeah, I'm still going to do my job. but I'm like, oh man, there's only like, I wish there was more people here, you know? So I'm sure they definitely had that going through their mind. And not only that is now talent has to get paid. Staff has to get paid. And I guess that's where we're going to go through now, huh?
Yeah, because the question is, how are you going to pay your talent if the crowds are not selling out?
Well, this is exactly what happened.
So take it away, buddy.
Like you said, the pay-per-view was an utter failure. And now it comes time to paying people. So Brian Blair told a story about how he went to go see Herb about past due money, and inside the room were 2 hookers and 2 piles of cocaine. Herb wrote a check for $2,000 for each girl while laughing and had them leave so he could talk to Brian. He said at that moment he questioned how long the promotion would last with someone like that in charge, right? And apparently a lot of wrestlers are being stiffed on their pay and started refusing to work, which is understandable. If this guy's promising you and I'll catch you next time, you keep hearing I'll catch you next time, and next time never comes, eventually you're just going to be fed up. Think about, for those listening out there, you have your job and you go to work and it's Friday, you're going to get paid, and your boss says, there was some problems, I'll get you next week, you'll get this check and next check. Okay, no problem. Out of good faith, you want to keep your job, you don't want to cause problems. You walk away, you go back to work on Monday. Next thing you know, you work throughout the week, it's Friday again, you go to get your paid, and he's like, oh, I'm sorry, man, I promise you I'll get you next week. And next week, and next week, I promise you next week. Eventually that gets tiring, and you're not going to work there anymore. It's no different in the wrestling business. You kind of have to, when you hear these stories, and I'm talking to you out there, the casual fan, the average person, you have to look at it as a 9-to-5 job, kind of, when you hear about these stories. And then you'll be able to understand it a lot more, because you'll be able to put it into more of a sense that you understand. So here's this guy, here's this employer who's constantly ditching people on their pay and stiffing them on their pay. They're not going to want to work there anymore. And Herb really only cared about partying. And and the sad part is he didn't care how much money he burned through. That's scary when you don't care how much money you're spending.
I mean, to say that's irresponsible, Kris, is a major understatement. And Herb believes he's a businessman. Like, what you're doing that recklessly, I mean, that's not the aspect of a businessman.
What it is he wanted the spotlight. He wanted to be one of the boys. He wanted to be in the business. He wanted to party like the guys in the business. He wanted to throw around the money like he had, And, eventually you live by the sword, you die by the sword, right?
Yeah, so in other words, he was way in over his head.
Way over his head. And at a TV taping, the TV crew, who, of course you have to pay them, they wanted money to produce the show. So Herb Abrams took them up to his office, and he called his bank. And the bank confirmed that Herb had millions in a bank account. He had 2 different bank accounts, though. He had one with millions in it that they just heard the bank tell him, and he had another with nothing. He would write checks from the empty bank account, and those checks would bounce. And those were the checks he would give to the hookers, to the wrestlers, to the TV crew, to his staff. And it got to the point where some wrestlers threatened to throw him over the roof of the building.
I mean, they were fed up, just like you said.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about people's livelihoods now. You can't promise people money and never pay them when they're doing work for you. I
mean, especially when it's a contractual guarantee. I mean, they can sue you for something called breach of contract.
Yeah,
and that's only gonna dig the hole deeper for you, buddy.
But here's the thing. This is where I get to the point. This is where I say there couldn't have been any contracts then. There couldn't have been. There may have been verbal agreements and pay per appearance deals, but there was really was no contract as far as who can sue and whatnot. Nowadays, that's put in there. But I'm sure there weren't contracts, at least no legal binding contracts.
And the fact there wasn't means that means there's no guarantee.
There is no guarantee, and it's just like if I go to work a show, I have a verbal agreement. Nowadays, it's a lot different with the laws and everything. Like, say I get a Facebook message from a promoter and we agree, that right there is considered an agreement. So if I bring that to court, I can sue that promoter if he doesn't pay me.
Mm-hmm, exactly, because that's proof.
Back then there was really nothing to protect these guys like that. I mean,
no social media, no texting.
No, there's no email, no nothing like that. So you had to take a guy on his word. Back then it was an old school way of doing things. If a man gave you his word, that man lived and died by his word. But because of the scumbag moves that he made, he was forced to run in smaller towns. But that didn't stop him from his cocaine addiction. That didn't stop him from partying. And you would think it would. Reality just didn't check in with him. And he became, because of the drugs, and I have to tell you 100% that this is because of the drugs. He started to become paranoid. He thought his hotel was bugged by the feds and that people were watching him. And his friend Lenny would even tell him, dude, it's the drugs talking. And he wouldn't believe him. And he had this fascination with couch cushions, or any cushions, where he had this thing where he zip them open and tear out all of the stuffing inside the cushions and search for wiretaps. And that was anywhere, whether it was in someone's home or whether it was in a hotel. Like, that was just his thing. He was that paranoid. And it's funny that they tell, I don't mean to say funny, but it's just my way of saying things. It's interesting to me because in the Motley Crue biopic, The Dirt, Nikki Sixx goes through the same thing with his heroin addiction, where he locks himself in his closet when he does his heroin, and he keeps a gun with him, and he's always checking, and he thinks someone's coming for him. He thinks someone's after him. He was found naked in the bushes one day. I read his book called The Heroin Diaries, which is about the years when he was on heroin, the heaviest, and how pretty much he would write in his diary as he's on heroin and shit. And you'd hear these stories of him being paranoid, and that's why I say it's 100% the drugs. So the drugs really took a hold of his life to where he didn't trust anybody, and he thought people were watching him. And here's this 5 foot tall guy who'd walk around naked, paranoid, in his cowboy's boots, just his cowboy boots. Which you guys can tell now that's the name of this episode, Cocaine and Cowboy Boots. He never took off his cowboy boots. And what's funny is that you would think like all of this would start to get to him and set into him, that he's realizing he's paranoid, but the way he coped with that was to do more drugs. And you would think that after having to run these small promotions, that would be it for Herb, right? No. Vince McMahon promotes WrestleMania 9, and it happened in Las Vegas. I believe at Caesar's Palace it was.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it was. I mean, the whole concept of that WrestleMania was...
Oh, it looked beautiful.
It was amazing, yeah.
It's one of my favorite WrestleManias to actually go back and watch because of, like, the production of it, man. It was something else, man. I know WWE does far beyond that nowadays, but back then, I was about, like, maybe, 2-3 years old, maybe, and, like, I kind of, like, clearly remember watching the pay-per-view. And then I would watch the tapes, and now on the WWE Network, it's one of my I'm just fascinated by that whole production.
And I'm actually amazed that you're actually the first person to tell me that you actually like the show, because most
I didn't say I like the show.
Oh, I'm sorry.
One of my favorite to go back because of production.
There were okay.
Like Shawn Michaels versus Tito Santana.
Mm-hmm.
I love that match. That was a good match. So there were a few good matches on there, But as far as production and the whole setup, that was like, it was big, larger than life, man. And because of that, Herb Abrams gets the idea to use Vegas as a way to showcase his product.
So in other words, he's trying to copy Vince McMahon.
Yeah, and that leads to what he dubs the Blackjack Brawl and the MGM Grand.
September 1994.
Alex, he couldn't sell out that arena in Palmetto, Florida. He's going for the fucking MGM Grand now, Alex.
I mean, can I ask you something, Chris, in this case then?
Go ahead.
Was Herb Abrams did he just go plain loco and delusional, or was he just plain cocky?
I think the drugs did play a factor in it, but also it's kind of, he was one of those guys that his ideas were bigger than what he can actually produce, you know?
But it also seems to me that he didn't think things through.
That happens a lot in the business, though, and that's where I really don't put the blame as far as that, because I'm even that type of person sometimes where I dream bigger than what I can actually fulfill, you know? It's just being creative. It's a gift and a curse. I go through it all the time where I have all these big ideas, but the difference between me and Herb Abrams is I think of reality, and I'll sit there and I'll always, it's what I call my rainy day book. I have all these ideas that I keep in my back pocket, you know, just in case an opportunity ever does come up. So I have all these ideas that I'll write down, and at the time of writing them down, I'll think about them, and I'll be like, man, that would be a great idea, but realistically that can't happen right now because of me financially, because of this. Because, you know, I always weigh out the options. But in Herb's case, it's, you know, he thought bigger. It's like my dad used to say, your eyes are bigger than your stomach. Back when I was a kid, I always wanted to eat everything. I was always hungry. I always wanted to eat everything, but I can never finish it. You know, I want a plate of lasagna, a big-ass plate of lasagna, but I can never finish it. And my dad would always say, your eyes are bigger than your stomach. In this case, his eyes were bigger than his stomach. His eyes, you know, his dreams and his goals were bigger than what he can actually fulfill.
Well said, Chris. And by the way, I owe you an apology because I interrupted you earlier. But
no, man, we shooting this shit here, man. That's
yeah. It's just the excitement going through my veins, man. It's going uncontrollable. But based on what you said, I mean, it just seems to me that Herb Abrams just simply did not think things through. I mean, think about, like I said, in my case, if I could not sell out a show at the arena at the University of Texas in Austin, and then I want to go do a show in Madison Square Garden, I'm like, if I could not sell out the show in Austin, do I really think I have a chance of selling out Madison Square Garden? No. I mean, I would realize that, but in Herb's case, maybe he just thought that I was like, it was just a rag. It'll get better. We'll be fine. It was just bad luck. I mean, it seems to me that that Herb just did not want to accept, just did not want to face the facts. He was failing. And he would not admit to it.
I feel for him, because there's still promoters out there today that they'll lose and lose and lose and lose on it. It's that will that, they don't want to feel like a failure. They don't want to fail. And I see that with Herb Abrams. He didn't want to fail. He didn't want to let this idea, because on paper, it seems good. Maybe with the right people in charge, and, it could have been something, and so he sees like it wasn't the product that was bad, that was killing it. It really wasn't. It was him. It was the marketing. It was the promotion. And I don't mean promotion as in the company. I mean promotion as in actually promoting the events. That's where the problem lied. So he knew the problem was not with the product. So he wanted to try. And hey, hats off. If at first you don't succeed, try again. So he looked at the MGM Grand and he wanted to do the MGM Grand. And that was Herb's mindset, is he always wanted to try for the biggest show he can, and he would pay out tons of money for the biggest names he can get. And for this show, Mick Foley said he went to Herb's suite, and judging by the size of it, Mick Foley thought, hey, they may be onto something. There could be 17,000 fans at this show, and this is where Mick Foley realized, okay, this is going to be the same old bullshit. Herb Abrams then shows off a pair of yellow ostrich cowboy boots that had the UWF logo on them. And he went to Mick Foley and said, look at this. People are going to lose their minds over this. And that's really what he thought. Like, he really thought that that was going to be what people came to see, is his yellow ostrich boots.
Hey, what was he thinking?
The spotlight. I want to be in the business. And it's hard to really explain what it is. It's like when you see it, you know it. Like, you know, as a wrestler, I see promoters like this all the time, where it's they want to be in charge. They want to be the boss. They want to be the money, and they also want to be the star. They pretty much want to be the star of their own show. And who's to say he can't, right? If he's paying out the money, who's to say he can't, right? I mean, ethically, as far as like being in the business and everything, no, it's pretty fucking wrong to do. But hey, fuck it. He wants to wear his yellow ostrich shoes. Whatever. That's where Mick Foley knew that this shit was going to be a drag. So the pay-per-view happens, and there's only, again, a few hundred people. And Mick Foley thought there were going to be 17,000 people here. So now they have the MGM Grand with only a couple hundred people there. And he was apparently really coked up for the show because he was just energized like the Energizer Bunny and coked up for the whole show. And at one point, screamed out to the crowd, "Let's hear it for the Jews."
Wow.
Yeah. And then apparently on commentary, he was just a mess on commentary. And from what they showed, like, he was just out there saying whatever came to his mind. And again, when you're on cocaine, man, and probably the amount of cocaine that he was on, he probably didn't even know what he was saying.
I mean, he was, like we said, he was in way over his head. He was probably delusional. And here's some details about the Blackjack Brawl. 600 in attendance only. And Mick Foley thought there was going to be 17,000 people. Huh. I mean, and here I'm taking, and as I'm looking, well, I mean, the wrestling card, you know, Mondo Guerrero was there, Sonny Beach was there, Bob Orton Jr., let's see, I mean, Cactus Jack wrestled Jimmy Snuka in a lumberjack match, and the way it ended was not good.
Well, that's what I'm going to get to now. Jimmy Snuka was Mick Foley's idol, right?
Mm-hmm.
And here's Mick Foley's chance to wrestle Jimmy Snuka in a lumberjack match. And they brawled throughout the 16,000 empty seats, and they're doing all this crazy stuff. And Mick Foley said, you know, people coming up and like, "Yo, what are you doing?" And Mick Foley was like, "It's Herb's show. He's not going to care." Well, because they started brawling out into the crowd, Herb Abrams gets on the mic and says, "This match is double disqualification." Just out the blue.
Wow.
In the middle of the match, just gets on the mic and calls it a double disqualification.
If he hadn't done that, do you think the results might have changed?
No. One match wasn't going to be able to save this man.
I mean, the main event, you know, Steve Williams versus Sid Vicious, or as we like to call him, Psycho Sid. It was a singles match for the World Heavyweight title, and guess how that match ended, too?
Why don't you tell us, Alex?
By a disqualification.
So again, there was no saving this show, and this is what's really, really sad. The show was a complete failure. Checks were bouncing, and in Herb's mind, he thought it was a success because he ran a show at the MGM Grand.
Okay, so now I want to ask, what did Herb Abrams define as success? The fact that he actually ran a show in a popular arena? I mean,
I'm thinking that's exactly what he meant. It's like saying, "Hey, I just ran Madison Square Garden, but one person came." But hey, I ran Madison Square Garden, you know?
I mean, I'm like, okay, and what did you get? And what did you get for your efforts? Nothing.
Nothing.
Absolutely nothing. Waste of time, waste of money.
his own confidant, Lenny, had told him it was a cluster that drew, he says 200 people, but from your stats, I'm going to go with your stats, just 600 people. But even after hearing that from his closest confidant, from one of his best friends, Herb still feels it's a success because he ran the MGM Grand. And I mean, that's as sad gets, man. And I get trying to look at the positives in any situation, trying to be positive and thinking about, the best of the situation. I'm sorry, that's not the way to think of that, man. Like, that was a total, like, loss. But again, he was someone that didn't care about money.
I mean, at the end of the day, there was no positive, if you ask me.
To someone like that, it doesn't matter. If he fulfilled his dream, then he's happy. And I mean, I guess when you look at it in that light, maybe, who's to say he was right or wrong? If that was his dream, and his dream was just running a popular venue like that, and he says money didn't matter to him, then you know what? Then and in his mind, he's successful. And you really can't take that away from him. You can't say he wasn't. Because if that was his definition of success, if that's all he wanted to do with his life, then hey, like if I said, hey, my dream was only to wrestle one match in my life, and I wrestle one match in my life, who's to sit there and say I'm not a success if that was my dream, you know? So I now that I think back, I really can't knock him if that was his dream. I mean, in my eyes, it was a failure. But hey, if he's happy and he can die happy saying, hey, I ran the MGM Grand, no matter how many people were there, who's to say that we should take his happiness from him?
That's an excellent point. But in this case, I can't imagine. I mean, I'm like thinking. I mean, how did Len think? How did the talent feel?
Well, we all know how Lenny felt and how the talent felt. But at the end of the day, if it's Herb's money, but no one was getting paid. That's where I would have to say he was wrong. Now, if he had taken care of everybody and paid everybody, and he still bombed on the show, then I guess I could really say, you know what, leave the guy alone. He did right by everybody, but that's the problem. And that's why we can't leave him alone, Alex, because he didn't do right by everybody. He fucking swindled everybody, and he promised everybody the moon and couldn't deliver. So really, we can't leave him alone for that. In his mind, he could feel he's a success, and he has every right to, or had every right to. But I mean, all in all, the drugs had to have played a factor, man, in that. I mean, because the drugs over time take a toll on your mind and your body. So for the years that he was sitting there sniffing out mounds of fucking cocaine, who knew what that was doing to his head, altering his thoughts, altering his business decisions. That's really a factor we have to think about. Is not only the decisions that Herb made as a businessman, but the decisions that Herb made as a drug addict. Because that's what I'm going to call it here. I'm not going to sugarcoat it and say, oh, he did a little cocaine. No, this man did massive amounts of fucking cocaine and needed help. That's an addict.
I mean, you're just simply telling the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
They said that the drugs had made him look like he aged 10 years and only 2 years because Lenny had seen him in 1996, in July of 96, and Herb seemed to have his act together and promised Lenny that he was clean, but this man looked like he aged so much in only 2 years, and drugs will do that to you. When you're getting off the drugs, like he got from the video they showed, he looked fatter, and I know like when you're on cocaine and you're addicted to cocaine, you're skinny, you're not gaining weight. So now if he had gained weight, maybe he was off the drugs,
Mm-hmm. And by the way, Blackjack Brawl turned out to be the last show that ever aired.
And and in this meeting with Lenny in this videotape, it was actually the last known recording of Abrams. And they said that he seemed happier and everyone thought he was sober. And then, next thing you know, Lenny gets a call from Sunny Beats that Herb had passed away. And even all the wrestlers, and this is what I found interesting, After all the bullshit that he had put these wrestlers through, they still cried over the phone when they found out the news. Everyone that found out the news was in tears because they knew the man, you know? And that's sometimes like you have to separate the drug addict from the man, you know? Yes, maybe he was a shitty businessman, but maybe he was a great person, you know? That's something that we don't really hear about in this episode, which I'm surprised because every other episode we've heard about how great the person was. We heard about how great Chris Benoit was as a person. We heard about how great Jimmy Snuka was as a person, you know? And here we're not hearing about the man that is Herb Abrams. We're hearing about the shitty businessman and the drug addict, you know? So I'm sure he might have been a great fucking person away from the drugs. And it just really, like, made you think, like, here are these guys who got fucked over by him, but still felt sympathy.
I mean, that element, that actually surprised me as well. I guess maybe because, you know, maybe they had some sort of ill feelings, but then they found out he died, because he died young. Maybe they just, maybe since it was so unexpected or whatever, maybe it just touched them, and maybe they just realized, you know what, it wasn't just about us. I mean, this guy had a dream just like we did.
Exactly, man. And unfortunately, on July 23rd, 1996, police responded to a scene at Herb's office. Apparently, there were cocaine and hookers involved, and he destroyed his office with a baseball bat. Mm-hmm. And they say that the escorts may have tried to rob him, and he decided to chase them naked with the bat. He had cocaine and baby oil all over his body. And then this is like where we start to hear a few different stories on this.
Oh yeah.
There's a story, there's a rumor that the police sodomized him with their nightstick. There was a story that he had a heart attack or a seizure. Brian Blair says he had died in the back of a police car. So I mean, there's a few different stories going on. It's just another one of these mysteries, man.
All these, you know, these are all just, you know, a bunch of dead ends because no one really knows what happened. We just know that he died young, and that apparently drugs had to do with it.
Yeah, and you know, they said that Brian Blair said that, you know, he left the world doing what he loved, cocaine and hookers, and I laughed. Me and my partner laughed when we did that because, you know, if you ask me, like, a lot of, so you're like, you know, how do you see, like, not that you know, is a normal question to ask anybody, but it's like, yeah, how would you go out? And oftentimes my answer is kind of pretty similar, you know, fucking dead in a hotel room with a bunch of fucking coke and hookers, bro. Like, you know, that's like I said, I love that rock star lifestyle, and, you know, if I choose to live that, you know, I know the consequences I live and die by. You know, but it's just crazy how that always used to be my joking answer is I'm fucking dead in a hotel with a bunch of hookers and cocaine. And then I watched this fucking episode and he went out doing what he loved, cocaine and hookers. So I had a kind of a laugh, but kind of a realization on that one. Like, is that really how I want to go out? Yeah, that is.
I mean, at the end of the day, if he died happy, then who are we to judge, Chris?
Fuck it. Well, what's really crazy about this is that there is one more story going around that he is not dead, that he faked his death.
And that really, I mean, I was dumbfounded.
Yeah, and one of the people that believe this theory is Marty, because he heard of a show called UWF running in South Carolina, and the promoter swore to him that Herb showed up pissed off that they were using the UWF name. And, you know, Marty's like, that can't be possible, describe this person, and he described Herb Abrams to a T. So that kind of, I'll be honest with you, as he was telling that story, it sent goosebumps up my arms, and I kind of started tearing from my eyes. And I noticed that happens when things that, like, normally, like, I would be like, that's fucking fake. When I start to believe them, like a lot of these ghost stories, like I watch a lot of the ghost shows and Paranormal Activity and things like that. And I used to not believe in it, but you know, something happened to me personally, you know, that started making me believe. And then now when I watch these shows, sometimes I'll hear the stories and I'll get like little tears in my eyes because it's like, whoa, like you feel it. No, that's real, man. And when he said this, you know, I got the goosebumps and I got the little, you know, the watery eyes and I got that chill up my spine. And it made me think, like, as much as people, everyone else would say he's dead, like, there's just this supernatural feeling I get that maybe Marty was right, you know?
I mean, personally, maybe you and I will never know.
And you know, Mick Foley says that he couldn't be. It would be impossible for Herb to keep quiet for 30 years. And I found that funny, but, you know, hey, again, Mick could be right. You know, maybe he is dead. Marty could be right. Maybe he's alive, you know. But the part that was really sad was Lenny, as he breaks down and he said, you know, that if Herb was alive, he would have some way, somehow sent him a message to let him know that he was alive, because he wouldn't do that to Lenny.
Yeah, he would not, like, abandon his friends. But, and I'm glad you mentioned Mick Foley, because Mick Foley was asked a very good question. If he had still been alive, what would you be doing right now with Herb? And Mick said, probably visiting him in prison, having a milk and cookies with him.
Yeah, he said, where, or what would he be doing? And Mick Foley says, time. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, they go to a shot where, at Herb's grave, I'm just so used to saying Herb. Herb's grave with Rick Allen, and he tells us that he had inherited Herb's dog, which I thought this was fucking funny as fuck. It's a Snow White dog named Cokie.
Mm-hmm. How ironic.
I don't mean to make light of situations, but I have to say, this man lived quite a life. Say what you want about the man as a businessman and, you know, about being a drug addict, but this man lived the fucking life that he wanted to live. And very few people get to do that. You know, I mean, I can't knock a guy like that. Like, I know I sit here and I talk about how shitty of a promoter he was, but I can't knock anyone. If that, like, fuck, you lived a fucking great life. And what I mean by great life is you lived that life that 99% of the people in this world don't get a chance to live, you know? You know, whether it's going out and partying or being in the business, you know, he lived that life. I'm sure if I had the opportunity, I would too. And I know there's probably going to be people out there that are thinking, oh, well, shouldn't Chris Rex learn from these people? It's, well, fuck, I obviously know the consequences ahead of me, but fuck it, you know, it's you only got one life, and fuck it, if I'm gonna die anyway, you know, I might as well go out how I want, right? And that's how he went out.
In my case, I mean, all I can say is if he died happy, then so fucking be it. I mean, who am I to judge?
Yeah.
I mean, there's really nothing else to say. He died happy. If he achieved his dreams, then fine. I mean,
yeah,
like I said, and we can't take that away from him.
Again, you know, he was a drug addict, and unfortunately, that led to a lot of bad decisions. But again, we're all in charge of our own fate. You know, we're all responsible for our own choices, both good and bad choices. Good choices have good consequences and bad consequences. You know, sometimes you think you're doing the right thing, you know, morally, but maybe you're not, you know, not doing the right thing, you know. So in every choice in life, there's good and bad consequences, and we are the only ones that can make those choices, you know.
What you do in life is, you know, you reap what you sow, right?
Yeah, man, and I mean that's pretty much the story here today, man. It was a wild one. It was, and I have to say, he was like really that first indie promoter. Like when you hear about the scumbag promoter, when you hear about the shady promoter, like he was that first guy, man. He was like that first popular one, and like we said at the beginning of the episode, he was somebody that wanted to go after Vince McMahon, which we learned time and time again is pointless sometimes. And I don't mean to knock AEW. I like AEW's product. I respect all the talent there. But But I say their biggest mistake is right off the bat is attacking Vince. Everyone it's always this bitter, this bitter attack, where it's like, oh, I'm mad, so I want to take out Vince. And it's like, that's going to take years to do, man.
Possibly decades.
WCW couldn't do it. ECW couldn't do it. TNA couldn't do it. I mean, I'm not saying the hope isn't there, but to take out Vince, it's going to take a long time. To really be competition to Vince. Now, I know they're head-to-head with NXT, but to be competition to Vince, that means you have to put on a show on Mondays. You got to put on a show on Tuesdays. You got to put on a show on Wednesdays. You know what I mean? Like, if you're truly going to compete with Vince McMahon, you have to compete with him. Your production values have to be up to par with him. Your marketing, your advertising and marketing, your sponsorship has to be up to par with him. Otherwise, you are not competition.
No.
Just running against his TV show isn't competition.
It's not, and not only that, but I would honestly say you should have a pay-per-view probably every 2 to 3 weeks. But that's going to be costly.
I mean that I know we're getting a little off topic, but I mean we pretty much covered the episode. I guess fans would want to hear us, talk about this. So let's give it to them. As far as the pay-per-views, I've always been a fan of pay-per-view should mean something. When you have a pay-per-view every month, I think that takes away. When you have a pay-per-view every 3 weeks, I think that takes away. I'm a fan of the 4 pay-per-views a year model. That means their pay-per-views mean something. That means they're going to pay the money because it's a spectacle. They're not going to see that all the time.
That's a very good point.
And I kind of see AEW following that model because they're not doing pay-per-views every month. They're doing them here and there, which makes their pay-per-views mean something. It makes their feuds mean something because back in the day, it was your feud ended at the pay-per-view. So if your next pay-per-view wasn't for another 3 months, you had 3 months to build your feuds and really get the most out of it. Now there's a fucking network special or a pay-per-view every week. And that's another thing that's kind of killing WWE's pay-per-view market is the whole network thing. Everything's on the network now. Why am I going to pay my cable provider, my satellite provider, when I can just get the network?
For a very good price, too.
I really feel, honestly, and I've been saying this for a couple of years, the pay-per-view and cable TV model will be dead soon. It's all about streaming.
Oh, yeah.
It's all about online. There'll still be TV, but it won't. I doubt it'll be physical cable boxes and physical satellite dishes, and everything will be online as a streaming service, as a subscription service. That's really the model we're going to now. So really, I would say pay-per-view means shit. Even I would say television ratings now really don't mean anything. So they really don't.
We're like in a whole new generation now.
Exactly. It's different. In the 90s, television ratings meant something because that's the only way you watched something. That's the only way you watched a TV show. It was a TV show. Now you have Hulu, you have Netflix, you have Amazon Prime, Apple has their thing now, Google has theirs, YouTube does their thing. I mean, there's so many different outlets now. You don't have to have cable now. You don't have to have satellite now. You can go anywhere and watch it. So I think the whole cable model is really dying, and I've been saying it for a few years now because I see it. It's more people are watching. Like you could have a show on TV, right? Let's say Masked Singer, right? That's a show that I watch, right? I do watch on TV sometimes. But more people are watching it, on Hulu than they are live, because it's the convenience. It's okay. Maybe at 8:00 I want to watch a different show. I can watch that show tomorrow, and I can watch this today. Or I'm working during these times. I can watch them tomorrow. So, what I really want to know is, maybe I'll do my research, is how are now streaming services factoring in ratings now, because if the same show is on a streaming service, then it's not actually a television rating, but there has to be some sort of viewership or rating statistics, right?
Mm-hmm. Just well explained. I mean, I just love how we go from how the things done in the 90s, how today it's just amazing how things change, how so many things changed in honestly just a small amount of time. I mean, we're at a point where I don't even watch TV from I don't actually have cable. I mean, because I don't need it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we're seriously getting way off topic, but folks, the bottom line is times change.
Yeah, and we're moving. It's all about convenience, man. That's it. It's really all about convenience. You could watch anything on your phone, and everybody has their phone with them at all times. So at any time, you can watch anything. At any time, you can listen to Dark Side of the Podcast.
Exactly.
And maybe that's a great way to end this.
And speaking of our listeners, I want to give a shout-out to everybody who's been sending me the compliments. Y'all, I really appreciate you giving my buddy Kris here the compliments as well. The introductions, how he leads the dance, guys. It actually helps me personally. Thank y'all very much for the strong support, and please keep supporting us. Share our products with your friends. Share it with your family. Share it with everybody. Your support is greatly appreciated.
And I really want to thank you today, Alex, because this man has a sore throat. You can't even tell. He did this whole show with me. Didn't complain once. I gotta give it to you, man.
Well, I gotta admit, I was actually crying through the show because of the pain. I don't know if you heard me sobbing a little bit, but I was actually crying.
Oh man, more power to you, man. You made it through.
I mean, it sounds weird. The Great Bear of Texas is crying because he has a sore throat. I'm like, well, I gotta admit, y'all, sore throats are painful. Yeah. So next week we'll preview it'll be the last ride of the Road Warriors. Now this one might actually make me cry because. I mean, the Road Warriors, when do you think of tag team wrestling, the Road Warriors come to mind.
Oh, yeah. They have to be top 3 in everybody's list.
Exactly. For those of you who follow me on Twitter, don't be surprised after the episode if I tweet what I did last couple of weeks. I just say, wow, and then put hashtag Dark Side of the Ring. That's basically what I'll do. So stay tuned next week, folks. The episodes will do our best. You'll just hear the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Kris, it was an honor to have you. Before we officially let you go, folks, let's give a shout-out to our good friend Darnell. As he released episode 3, Bigger Than Basketball, on how he's covering The Last Dance. So please listen to it. Again, folks, your support is greatly appreciated. Let's all keep working together because teamwork is key, y'all. Y'all have a good night. And Kris, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you.